All right, let's have some more DBA questions. These questions are about MySQL data directory, log file, configuration file, global variables, session variables, socket file, and MySQL user accounts. These are not hard questions, but all the DBAs should definitely know their answers. So if you have gone through the exploring the MySQL section that you are watching the course Becoming Production MySQL DBA, you should have no problem answering them. So here we go. The first question. How would you provide the database credentials for a microservice that needs to interact with MySQL? So what this really means is that you are a DBA in a company, they have microservices, and every application use a different programming language like Python. Some apps are written in Java, some .NET, and they came to you and asked you, how would you provide them the MySQL credentials? What things you need to provide them, and where they should put this configuration so they can connect to the MySQL. And the answer is MySQL Client Library. MySQL provide different client libraries for different applications. Okay, JDBC, for example, is for the Java programming language. If you have an application written in Python, you need something is called Python connector library. Okay, .NET has its own library. Okay, and then when they will come to you, the programmer, you need to provide them the port number where the MySQL is running. Normally it will be 3306, the username, specific user for a specific application. This is a hard set rule. Do not use one user for all the applications. One app, one specific user, and that should have only the permissions to that app. And then definitely you need to provide the password and the host name or the IP address. Second question. What is the DATADIR and how would you get the value of it from MySQL client? What this question is, let's say they say that you are a cloud DBA, they don't have access to the database host, but they really want to know from within the MySQL prompt, what is the path of DATADIR? Okay, if you have access to the MySQL host, you can definitely SSH into it and you can find it, but you don't know. So within the MySQL shell, how would you find the variable value of DATADIR or any other variable, so to say? And the answer is the default directory to store all the MySQL databases, which is the DATADIR, is you can either use select global dot DATADIR, or you can use show globals, the old classic way, show global variables like DATADIR. And please remember that this DATADIR is the default home directory for the MySQL user that own this MySQL installation. So if somebody will delete this MySQL user with -R, that also delete his home directory, that means you really mess up the MySQL installation. Third question, what is the first place that you would go to troubleshoot MySQL issues? This is a very common question. They start with this one. So we have some slowness in the MySQL. There are some certain issues that the programmers and the end users or the developers, they are complaining about this. Where would you go the very first place to troubleshoot? And the answer is you will always go to the MySQL log file. And as you know, the default MySQL log file is called MySQL d.log, and its default location on the Unix system is var log MySQL d.log. The fourth question, what is MySQL global configuration file? Where can you find it and which user owns it? This is a very tricky question, not really tricky question, but since whenever they talk about global configuration, you always bring this root user in place. Even though MySQL runs under MySQL user, but the configuration file, since it is under etc, any file that is under etc will require you to have a sudo privileges. Okay, so the configuration settings for the MySQL as a whole, it is under my.cnf. This is called the global configuration file, and this is under etc. Since this file is under etc, the user root owns this file, not the MySQL user. You need to remember this one. Okay. The next question. You are asked to run MySQL admin utility command to shut down MySQL, but when you run the command, you get command not found. How do you fix it? You know MySQL is running on the system and MySQL admin is the utility used by the DBAs to quickly shut down a MySQL. But once you see that command not found, what really rings the bell? I mean, this is the common question they will ask you. You in reply don't ask, oh, maybe MySQL is not installed there. No, MySQL is installed. So what other obvious thing that comes into your mind is that the path for the MySQL admin utility, maybe it is not in the path variable. And as you have gone through the section, you know all the executable of the related to the MySQL, they all start with the MySQL and they are all under user bin. It is very obvious for the user that this path, this location is the part of the path, but sometimes when you have logged in as a root, maybe the root user has a user S bin in the path and not the user bin. So you need to make sure that the path variable has this location so that you can run the all MySQL related executable programs. Next question. How would you run db _ changes.sql file from within a MySQL shell? I mean, this db _ changes, I just gave this a sample name. It could be any .sql file and you are supposed to run this within a MySQL that you are already connected through a MySQL client. You have a MySQL prompt because you don't have access to the underlying DB host. How would you run this SQL command so that it can be executed against the MySQL? Very easy, very easy question, but a lot of people, a lot of DBAs, when they go to the interviews, they forget. They don't know the answer. Okay, so the answer is source. Either you can use source and then provide the file name, or you can use if you are within the MySQL, since this question is related to within the MySQL, then you definitely use source. But when you will see that db changes.sql, you have to pwd, you have to cd to the directory where the file is. The source will assume that you have started the MySQL client from the directory where the file is. Most of the time DBAs get confused that they are using the source, but they are not in the correct directory. Okay, the next question. Your financial application requires no one can connect to its MySQL backend database remotely. On a Unix system, which file is responsible for the clients to connect to the MySQL locally? So the financial application has a financial database. They do not want you to connect remotely, but only locally you can connect. Which file, which Unix file on a Unix system is responsible for the connections to have made locally and not remotely? And the answer is Unix domain socket file. This is a Unix file, but that is owned by MySQL because this file is located in the DATADIR. It is owned by MySQL user. Normally this file is empty, and then when MySQL start, it put a PID, only the PID in this file. So MySQL.sock is the file that will make the connections locally on the host. Without this file, even the MySQL server is running, you are not able to connect on the host. What is the difference between MySQL global variables versus session variables? Very common DBA question. A lot of interviewer ask this question to know that if a DBA knows that why they ask this question is that sometimes you make the changes on the MySQL server level, but you are actually running the command at the session level. So this is very important to understand. So you should definitely know the difference between global versus session variable. And I know you know it. The global variables affect the whole MySQL server, and the session variables only persist only at the current session level. So even if you run a global variable set global command, even then that change will not persist after your MySQL host is restarted. In order for make it to permanent, you make this global variable entry in the etc.mycnf file. This is very, very important. I myself have few times missed this piece. I made the changes, set global, and I thought that it will persist. It will affect the whole MySQL server, but it will not persist beyond the rebooting of a system. So this is very important point to understand. What are the system schemas? This is very common and easy questions, and most of the people, they do not know the answer. So the system schemas are special databases that you never ever touch them, you never ever drop them, you only query them to get the metadata about the MySQL server itself. Few of the system schemas are information schema, performance schema, and if somebody will ask you how about the sys schema, and you can tell that the sys schema only available in MySQL 8.4. So what these schemas are? These are basically the information about the information of a MySQL server itself. Last question. Why some MySQL accounts have wildcard in their username? You might have seen couple of user when you run MySQL.user, you will see a lot of accounts have at the rate of this modulus wildcard or modular, or some have at the rate of localhost. What this really signify is that any user that has this modulus operator or the wildcard symbol at the rate along with their username, they can log into the MySQL from anywhere. Okay, but if a user has a local host as part of their username, they can only connect locally. Okay, this is very, very important. As a DBA, you must know that the MySQL accounts have two types. One is connecting remotely, another is connecting manually. Okay, so if you want to have only user connect manually, like root user will never ever you want to make it connect remotely, so you will always see that root user is at the rate of local host. Okay, and that is it for now. We will have more DBA interview questions as we move along the course, so stay focused, go through the next section, and in the meanwhile I will prepare more DBA questions for you, and for that I will see you very soon.